Lecture 8, East Asian Nationalism. East Asian countries responded to Western imperialism with nationalism. In order to understand what nationalism is, the term nation and state needs to be defined. A state, in a sense of a politically sovereign state, refers to a defined territory that is ruled by a government with the power to legislate, enforce, and judge laws. A nation is comprised of a group of people who share significant characteristics. These characteristics may include ethnic, religious, linguistic, and historical components. A nation-state is a self-governing political entity that is united by a dominant national identity. According to this definition, not all sovereign states are nation-states because it is possible to have multiple nations within a sovereign state. Such a state is a polyglot state and is made up of a number of large national groups. The former Yugoslavia was a polyglot state, which was a factor for its demise. In contrast, the Palestinians are a stateless nation since they have no land of their own and yet are a people. As a further contrast, the Cherokee Indian tribe is a nation with a land of its own within the United States. Now that terms directly related in our linguistic ecosystem to nationalism have been defined, we will define nationalism. According to nationalism, every nation has right to be an autonomous political entity. In other words, for every nation, there ought to be a state. This common assumption is a relatively new one in world history. Antiquity in the medieval times had empires and kingdoms in which nations coexisted. Nationalism first developed after Europe's medieval time. After the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, and the French Revolution from 1789 to 1799, nationalism intensified and spread across Europe, bringing in its wake a series of wars in which nationalities fought for their independence. About a century later, in the late 1800s, nationalism arose in East and Southeast Asia. According to the basic principle of nationalism, that for every nation there ought to be a sovereign state, Asians began to rebel against colonial and imperial rule. As a result, nationalistic movements became prominent in China, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Burma, and to a lesser extent in Cambodia, Laos, Malaya, and the Philippines. China and the Boxer Rebellion. About 40 years after the Second Opium War, and during the summer of 1898, China's Shandong province experienced a terrible flood. The flood was caused by the breaking of the Yellow River dikes. Millions of Chinese quickly became homeless, and the crops were destroyed. Some people expressed their frustration by directing their anger at the government and at foreigners, especially foreign missionaries. The movement that gradually took place was called by Westerners Boxers because of the ability of some in the anti-government and anti-foreign movement to box or to practice martial arts. In 1899, the governor of the Shandong province was able to put an end to the civil unrest caused by the Boxers. The Boxers responded by moving to other regions in China, where they intensified their rhetoric by demanding death to foreigners in China and to Chinese who had been corrupted by foreign influence. On June 20th, 1900, the German minister Baron von Kettler was assassinated in Beijing. Following the incident, foreigners took refuge in the well-built North Cathedral of Beijing of the Legation Quarter. According to eyewitness accounts, the Boxers vented their anger against foreigners and Chinese suspected of being foreign collaborators in the following manner, and I quote. This is an eyewitness account, so it will be a primary source. Women and children hacked to pieces, men trussed like fowls with noses and ears cut off and eyes gouged out. Many were found roasted alive and so massacred and cut up as to be unrecognizable. The stench of human blood in the hot June air was almost intolerable, and the signs more than we can bear. Men, women, and children lay indiscriminately heaped together, some hacked to pieces, others with their throats cut from ear to ear, some still moving, others quite motionless. Their fiendish murderers were at their incantations, burning incense before their gods, offering Christians in sacrifice to their angered deities. End of quote. With the support of Japan, Western countries responded by sending in 20,000 troops. Within a year's time, there were a 40,000 eight-nation force in North China. These troops brought an end to the Boxer Revolt. In September 7, 1901, the Qing Empire of China signed a multilateral treaty called the Boxer Protocol. The other sides represented included Germany, Austro-Hungary, Belgium, Spain, the US, France, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, Holland, and Russia. And in your transcript, I provide key excerpts from the treaty. Japan and the fall of the shogunate. The previous lecture presented Commodore Perry's hard diplomacy with Japan and the shogunate's capitulations to his demands by signing the 1854 Treaty of Kanagawa. In 1858, the first U.S. consul to Japan, Townsend Harris, negotiated a commercial treaty with Japan that exceeded the Treaty of Kanagawa. A few excerpts from the Harris Treaty, or Treaty of Amity and Commerce, will be given, and I will begin. The President of the United States of America and His Majesty the Tycoon of Japan, desiring to establish on firm and lasting foundations the relations of peace and friendship now happily existing between the two countries, and to secure the best interest of their respective citizens and subjects by encouraging, facilitating, regulating their industry and trade, have resolved to conclude a treaty of amity and commerce for this purpose. There shall henceforward be perpetual peace and friendship between the United States of America and His Majesty the Tycoon of Japan and his successors. The President of the United States may appoint a diplomatic agent to reside at the city of Yedo, and consuls or consular agents to reside at any or all of the ports in Japan which are open for American commerce by this treaty. The diplomatic agent and the consul general of the United States shall have the right to travel freely in any part of the Empire of Japan from the time they enter on the discharge of their official duties. In addition to the ports of Samoda and Hakodate, the following ports and towns shall be opened on the dates respectively appended to them. And then it gives those dates. The importation of opium is prohibited. No higher duty shall be paid by Americans on goods imported into Japan than are fixed by this treaty, nor shall any higher duties be paid by Americans than are levied on the same description of goods if imported in Japanese vessels or the vessels of any other nation. In the opened harbors of Japan, Americans shall be free to go where they please within the following limits. Americans in Japan shall be allowed the free exercise of their religion, and for this purpose shall have the right to erect suitable places of worship. No injury shall be done to such buildings, nor any insult be offered to the religious worship of Americans. American citizens shall not injure any Japanese temple or miya, or offer any insult or injury to Japanese religious ceremonies or to the objects of their worship. End of quote. When Emperor Komei, he reigned from 1846 to 1867, was asked to support the shogunate signing the Harris Treaty, he refused, and even in May of 1863 formally demanded that the U.S. and the other foreign presence be expelled from Japan. The emperor's nationalism was supported by many who viewed the shogunate as having committed an act of treason by signing the Harris Treaty. Tension naturally developed between supporters of the shogunate and supporters of the emperor. When Emperor Komei died in 1867, he was succeeded by Emperor Meiji, who reigned from 1867 to 1912. Meiji shared Komei's anti-Western beliefs, and he had the office of the shogun terminated. The shogunate responded by fighting the emperor's forces. In 4 days, though, the shogunate's forces were defeated, and Emperor Meiji was able to firmly establish his power. Korea and isolation. Like Japan, Korea also responded to Western power with nationalism. Under the reign of Prince Hungsun, Korea isolated itself from foreign powers. The prince ruled Korea from 1864 to 1874, since the Joseon dynasty, which had ruled Korea with 25 successive kings, did not have an heir. This led the Queen Dowager to choose an heir. She chose Prince Hungsun's son as the heir, but since the prince's son was only 11 years old, Prince Hungsun ruled in his son's place until his son was mature enough to rule. Upon taking the throne, Prince Hungsun took the title Grand Prince or Daewongun. Under his rule, he consistently rejected Western invitations to enter into a commercial relationship, even when these overtures were made with Western warships. In one case, the USS General Sherman, an American merchant ship, was burned and its crew killed when this ship, armed with cannons, entered into Korea's Daedong River. When Daewong's son Gojong came of age, he took the throne as King Gojong, and he reigned from 1864 to 1907. King Gojong changed Korea's direction by reforming the monarchy and opening up Korea to foreign trade. At first, though, when Meiji Japan sent a letter to the Korean court requesting in strong language a trading agreement, King Gojong, listening to his advisors, rejected it. This caused Meiji Japan to imitate the Western practice of gunboat diplomacy. On September 20th, 1875, a Japanese warship entered into Korean waters and engaged in a battle with the Korean military. This military conflict between Korea and Japan ended with Japan as the victor and Korea signing for the first time a modern treaty with a foreign power, the 1876 Ganghwa Treaty, signed by King Gojong. King Gojong signed this treaty despite resistance from influential government officials not to. The Japanese victory encouraged other foreign powers to also establish trade agreements with Korea. In order to reduce Japanese influence over Korea, Chinese Qing dynasties solidified its economic relationship with Korea. On May 22, 1882, the United States became the first Western country to establish a trade agreement with Korea called the Treaty of Peace, Amity, Commerce, and Navigation. In 1883, Britain and Germany signed trade treaties with Korea. This was followed by Russia signing a trade treaty with Korea in 1884. Finally, France signed a treaty with Korea in 1886. France's treaty included an article that allowed Catholic missionaries to evangelize in Korea. During the 1880s, supporters of Daewongun's isolationist policy demanded he replace his son as king. This caused riots and political unrest that troubled both China and Japan. They responded by sending troops to Korea in support of King Gojong. Daewongun was captured by the Chinese and taken into China. With his father out of the way, King Gojong renewed his open-door policy with the slogan, Eastern Way and Western Technology. In 1897, after persevering through political turmoil, including the failed Gapsin coup of 1884, King Gojong greatly won over public approval by proclaiming Korea an empire. This act signaled that Korea was independent from and equal in status to China and other countries. His empire and rule came to an end when Japan, after successfully defeating Russia in the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905, forced Emperor Gojong to abdicate, and in 1910 annexed Korea under the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty. Southeast Asian colonies and nationalism. In varying degrees, nationalism also arose throughout Southeast Asia. Since it would be lengthy to compare and contrast the various expressions of nationalism in Southeast Asia during the time frame we are studying, I will conclude with a poetic expression of nationalism called The Tale of Q from Vietnam. The poem The Tale of Q, written by Nguyen Du in the early 1800s, represents hidden nationalistic spirit of the Vietnamese during the 1800s. The poem tells the story of a beautiful, intelligent young woman, Q. Although she was forced into concubinage and later into prostitution, she remained true to the one she truly loved. By so doing, in the eyes of the Vietnamese, she retained her dignity and honor. Q was understood at the time to symbolize the Vietnamese people, who kept their honor even though they were forced into servitude both by the French imperialists and Vietnamese who collaborated with the French. Below, I will now read an excerpt from the Tale of Q. An oath bound us together, he replied. We split like fish to sea and bird to sky. Though your long exile, how I grieved for you. Breaking your troth, you must have suffered so. We loved each other, risked our lives. Brave death, now we two meet again, still deep in love. The willow in midstring still has green leaves. I thought you still attached to human love. But no more dust stains your clear mirror now. Your vow can't but increase my high regard. If I long searched the sea for my lost pin, it was true love, not lust, that urged me on. We're back together now, beneath one roof, to live in concord, need to share one bed. Q pinned her hair and straightened up her gown, then knelt to touch her head in gratitude. If ever my soiled body's cleansed of stains, I'll thank a gentleman, a noble soul. The words you spoke came from a kindred heart, no true empathy between two souls. A home, a refuge, why won't you give me? My honor loves again as of tonight. End of quote. God bless.